House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 4 is called King of the Narrow Sea, which refers to Daemon Targaryen. In the previous episode, Daemon proved he's not just arrogant, he's actually got the military skills to back it up. There's much more of him to see in this episode, which also continues the Rhaenyra storyline from last episode's hunting trip. These two characters are the focus of King of the Narrow Sea. We start off in Storm's End. Rhaenyra sat next to the Lord Baratheon and a long line of suitors waiting to make their case for Rhaenyra's hand in marriage. We get a long, dull pitch from Lord Dondarrion about how awesome his castle is. It seems like this is one of many long, dull speeches that Rhaenyra has heard, or more likely she's got little tolerance for all this search for a husband, which we learn her father has arranged. The object of Rhaenyra's affection, at the moment at least, is Criston Cole. Rhaenyra is playing with her jewellery as Cole looks on, both of them barely able to pretend to take the process seriously. When a fight breaks out between a Bracken and a Blackwood, a couple of Riverland houses I think we'll be seeing more of later in the story, Rhaenyra uses it as an excuse to leave, jumping back on a ship and going back to King's Landing. We find out she's going home 2 months early, basically still not willing to find a husband. As they approach King's Landing, we see Caraxes, presumably with Daemon riding him, who fully knocks the ship so it tilts significantly in the water, like it's some kind of medieval fairground ride. Rhaenyra loves this. She seems giddy with excitement at the prospect of seeing Daemon again. So, the man who really excites her is her uncle. I think we can see where this is going. We cut to King's Landing and the throne room in the Red Keep, where, by the end of the scene, Daemon and his brother reconcile to thunderous applause. There's a massive public audience, obviously nervous about what's going to happen, who see Daemon offer both his sword and his Driftwood Crown to Viserys, also acknowledge Viserys as the one true king. Daemon chooses to do this, despite the King's Guard drawing their swords as he approaches, one of them going as far as to put his sword on Daemon's breastplate. It's kind of reminiscent of Episode 1, when Daemon was summoned to the throne room in the wake of the Heir for a Day speech. That was much less public, just Viserys, Daemon and some Kingsguard. Why don't these brothers chat in private? Doesn't risking a public confrontation here, or public in the sense of in front of the Westeros elite, risk more damage to Viserys and the family overall? The scene is built up in such a way that you and the characters genuinely don't know what Daemon's going to do, and that's a more fun character to watch, sure. If you're a medieval king with a wayward brother who actually wants to bend the knee to you, wouldn't you want to find that out beforehand, then stage manage something together? Something with less threat of violence at the beginning, perhaps. The problem this scene creates for Viserys is that Daemon looks like the protagonist of the scene, like he's the main character. It's that he's chosen to put aside thoughts of rebellion. And that implies that Viserys has not asserted his authority here, he's just been lucky. At this point, what's to stop Daemon being a more literal king of the Narrow Sea, taking the Velaryon fleet and raiding up and down from the Stepstones to Braavos and causing Viserys more problems? Nothing seems to stop him, except that Daemon and Corlys choose not to do that. If you're a member of the Westerosi aristocracy looking at this scene, Viserys looks weak here. However pleasing it might be to see the brothers getting along. I guess to celebrate Daemon coming back into the fold, we see the Targaryens having a bit of a garden party, but it's all a bit awkward for most of them. Viserys is wildly drunk again, forcing a smile at how little Daemon cares for tapestries, and it seems also for garden parties. Alicent is feeling lonely and like a bit of a baby factory, and Rhaenyra is looking at Alicent and seeing her own future. This forces a bit of a thaw in the relationship between them, and the two women share some kind words. It does seem like they've genuinely missed each other. I love the affection they show here, it's very sweet. Soon enough, Daemon and Rhaenyra are talking to their favourite people, each other. We find out it's 4 years since they've last met. Presumably that was the confrontation at Dragonstone. Rhaenyra shares her fears about marriage in general and childbirth in particular. Marriage, Daemon assures her, is a political arrangement. Once you are wed, you can do as you like. I'm pretty sure this isn't the advice that Viserys wants her to hear. It's kind of pandering to the more indulgent side than to the responsible future monarch side. As a brief follow-up on the general political situation, we get a short small council scene. Corlys is being difficult. threatening to marry his daughter to the Sea Lord of Braavos, and reminding Viserys that, in practice, House Velaryon, not the Iron Throne, is the actual naval power in Westeros. With that out of the way, the rest of the episode is very much Rhaenyra focused, and her indulgent side is driving her right now. In the evening, she arrives in her chambers and sees a bag with clothes and a map. There's a secret passage behind her room. She gets dressed, follows the map. We go on a bit of a journey through the Red Keep, past Balerion's skull, and end up leaving the castle. Daemon is waiting for her, his hood up, presumably to hide his hair, or maybe it's just cold out. They walk through the streets of King's Landing, watching all the degenerate delights that the streets have. Stuff like fornication, alcohol, and juggling. Major spoilers for the next 10 seconds or so. A fortune teller speaks to Rhaenyra. Do you wish to know your death, child? Then we cut to a stone dragon on a wall. Then we see flame coming out of its mouth. They go to see a play, like Arya did in Braavos in Game of Thrones. In a similar way to that scene with Arya, it's laden with meaning for Rhaenyra. The play is called The Great Iron Chair, and it's about the succession crisis, in a coded way, of course. I doubt Viserys would allow something more direct. The candidates for the Great Iron Chair are the brother, the daughter, or the little princeling of 3, so Daemon, Rhaenyra, or Alicent's firstborn child. If Prince Aegon is 3, this episode is at least 1 year after the hunting trip. Episode 3 is therefore 3 years after Episode 2. Many years are passing in the story, and not much is being settled. For me, this fits nicely with Viserys' indecision. The audience watching the play doesn't react well to the mention of the daughter, Rhaenyra. She dismisses this, but Daemon disagrees. The small folk are of great consequence if you expect to rule them one day. Rhaenyra engages in a verbal dodge and weave. She wishes to be free of the burden of my inheritance. This feels, as the kids say, to be a major cope. She's disappointed the crowd don't cheer for her. Then she says they don't matter. Then she's like, I don't even want to be queen. I'm not even bothered. She's not morally consistent here, and Daemon's not the guy to offer moral consistency beyond the promotion of self-indulgence. After a brief chase through the streets where they bump into Harwin Strong, Daemon and Rhaenyra end up at a brothel, and it's not totally clear what happened, I think. In the sequence where the most activity happens, or is suggested at least, Rhaenyra and Daemon are standing up, and the camera frames them from about chest height upwards, so we can't really see their arms or their hands for a long time. So it's implied they could be doing a lot below the line of sight of the camera, but you can't actually infer much from the way it's shot. I guess there could be a gentle hide the salami going on, or it could just be a case of wandering hands, but it's definitely not like a rough rogering. It's about as tasteful and coy as the scene could really be, while still suggesting that Daemon is out to morally corrupt Rhaenyra, that perhaps her lack of discipline is a sign that she's ready to be further corrupted. Marriage is a duty, Rhaenyra tells her uncle, but considering the actions we saw from her at the beginning of the episode, it's a duty she's doing everything to avoid. Daemon's response is that it doesn't stop us doing what we want, and after they do what they want, whatever it was they did do, it was very public. Rhaenyra breaks off and leaves, running back through the city and returning to the Red Keep through the front door. She goes back to her bedroom, and on the way in, steals Criston Cole's helmet. This leads him to follow her into the room. She initiates physical, romantic things immediately, and the two of them start to undress. Rhaenyra is very much the aggressor here, and Cole chooses to respond with the little head rather than the big head. As he starts to unstrap his body armor, he spends a couple of seconds looking longingly across at the closed door. What's he thinking here? He's attracted to Rhaenyra, for sure, but I guess he knows he's betraying his King's Guard oath in order to do that. Does he believe that Rhaenyra is worth doing that for, especially when he's surely aware of the dynamic between Rhaenyra and her uncle? I guess he knows if he wants Rhaenyra, he has to give up his only real achievement in life, his King's Guard oath. Whatever he's thinking, it doesn't make him stop, and the two of them go all the way. And the third and the final act of the episode is the fallout from Rhaenyra and Daemon's actions. This begins early in the morning, when a young boy arrives at the doors of the Red Keep with a message from the White Worm for Otto Hightower. The White Worm is Mysaria, who seems to have built up something of a spy network down in King's Landing. Otto is obviously a bit rocked by hearing what Rhaenyra and Daemon have been up to. After a period of thought, he goes to break the news to Viserys. Viserys listens in disbelief and horror. He isn't inclined to believe what he's hearing, accusing Otto of being sick with ambition, pointing out it's a reputation-destroying allegation. It's not just Viserys that feels personally rocked by this. Alicent is hiding in the room as her father breaks the news to her husband. Her and Rhaenyra have only just reached some kind of mutual understanding. She visits Rhaenyra in the Godswood. "What happened last night?" Alicent asks. I love how in this scene we see the face on the weirwood framed in the background as the two women talk. Rhaenyra calls it a vile accusation, calls her Alicent, "Your Grace, sister. Daemon never touched me," she insists. "I swear this to you upon the memory of my mother." The viewer knows Rhaenyra is lying. I think it's an interesting counterfactual to speculate what would have happened if Rhaenyra had been truthful here. Clearly, Alicent would not have behaved the way Rhaenyra behaved, but could she accept that Rhaenyra is just built differently to her? I'm not sure if it's the action itself or the lie afterwards that makes this the final break in the relationship between the two. Either way, I think this is the conversation that allows Alicent to take the moral high ground in her future dealings with Rhaenyra. Viserys also has to deal with Daemon. We see Daemon waking up in some hovel down in King's Landing. After chatting with Mysaria, he walks through the front gate of the Red Keep, like Rhaenyra did, and is immediately apprehended by the guards and taken to the throne room. Viserys kicks him and holds a weapon to his throat, saying that Daemon has defiled Rhaenyra. The younger brother asks to marry Rhaenyra, compares himself to Aegon the Conqueror, like he did in episode 1. Viserys banishes his younger brother, asking him to be gone from his sight for good. Something I didn't actually notice about this scene until I was making a thumbnail for the video is that Daemon isn't actually frightened at any point. He's actually crying when Viserys is holding him on the floor. It seems like he might actually genuinely want to marry Rhaenyra, and he's just confused as to why his brother is not open to this. So that's Daemon out of the picture for the rest of this episode. We see Viserys and Alicent talking to each other. Alicent reports the conversation she had in the Godswood. Rhaenyra swore nothing happened. Rhaenyra swore she is still pure. Alicent tells Viserys she believes that's true. Again, Alicent doesn't know it yet, but Rhaenyra is playing her for a fool. After this, we see Viserys ready to confront his daughter. Instead of asking about the details, he frames it in terms of her overall responsibilities as his heir. We see Viserys show her the dagger, Joffrey Baratheon's dagger, the cat's paw dagger, which we discover belonged to Aegon the Conqueror. The last Valyrian pyromancer hid a prophecy written in the steel. In House of the Dragon, we've seen the Dragon Keepers. Now we get a little bit more Valyrian culture with the pyromancers. I'd love to see a story with a Valyrian pyromancer. I'm not holding my breath. Viserys talks about the prince that was promised, and his will be the Song of Ice and Fire. Viserys is setting the context, the rationale for the legitimacy of the Targaryen dynasty, and this is the responsibility that he wants to trust Rhaenyra with. That perception is more important than the truth when it comes to monarchy and power. "If I were born a man," Rhaenyra begins, but Viserys isn't here for a philosophical debate on gender fairness. He offers Rhaenyra a deal. She will wed the son of Corlys Velaryon, and do so without protest. Rhaenyra starts complaining about, quote, "the vulture who perches on your throne," end quote. And this is the deal. Rhaenyra will marry, and the price is Otto Hightower gets fired. Viserys is okay with this. He doesn't like bad news, and after what he's heard this morning, he seems inclined to fire Otto anyway. But in the final scene of the episode, we see that Viserys isn't completely confident that Otto was lying. Rhaenyra is in her chamber and is visited by the Grand Maester, who brings her, on the orders of the king, some moon tea. As anyone who has read the books or watched Game of Thrones will know, moon tea is a remedy for women with an unwanted pregnancy. So I guess Viserys doesn't trust his daughter to tell the truth. We've seen in this episode that he's right not to trust her, but he still fired Otto. Why? I guess in the end, that's the price of getting Rhaenyra married. It was a price he was willing to pay. Let's hope it works out for him. Thanks for watching.